My name is Sid Coleman. I'm glad to be here tonight, and glad to see all of y'all here tonight. I was thinking that when John was doing his step one reflection, I was reminded of something that my sister's in the crowd tonight, and she'll probably fuss at me a little bit for this, but I was thinking about all the things that helped me realize just how powerless I was and how unmanageable my life was. And so she was the one that came and got me out of the Senatobia jail when I was 15 years old. So I'm thinking that from that day forward, my sister was a little bit worried about me. Matter of fact, I know that for a fact. But as we sit and we listen, the Spirit takes what's said and it works in our minds to recall things just because we need them to be recalled sometimes. So I was thinking about step one, and on our way to this third step prayer, and how I didn't think I needed it. I didn't think I needed the change for a long time. I thought I had everything worked out. I was going to have fun for a little while, and then I was going to straighten up, as we call it. And so the thing is, when it came time to straighten up, I didn't have any power to straighten up. And I started making decision after decision after decision. I was also reminded that some of those decisions was at this church congregation here. And those decisions would be sincere, and I meant everything that I was committing to, but I just didn't have what it took to follow through at the time. So I would make decision after decision, starting in my mid-20s up until the age of 38. I would make several decisions to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him. And I would say prayers, something like this third step prayer, and they just didn't last. So there where we left off on page 64 in the big book, at the top of that page, it says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. And so what I found out later is I wasn't putting any action with my faith. And in James chapter 2, he uses Abraham as an example. And he says that Abraham's actions made his faith complete. And so faith without works is what? Dead, okay? Anybody ever experienced works without faith being dead also? Works without faith is also dead. So what I found out is there was more to it than making a decision. I would make this commitment, and I would make it with a sincere heart, but I didn't have what it took to continue that. The permanent effect didn't happen. And so I kept making decisions, and I don't know about y'all, but I didn't make a conscious effort to turn and go the other way. I always drifted away. I would drift away, and I do that with other decisions too. I like to work out, and sometimes I'll make a decision to get in shape, and it'll last for a week or a month or something like that, and then all of a sudden something comes up and I miss one, and then after I miss one, I start missing some more, and before long I forgot that I made that commitment. And so that's kind of how it would work for me. So I would make a decision and turn my will, my life over to the care of God as I understood Him. And then I would think that everything was going to work out from there. And actually, that's where the work really started for me. And so we get to this place where we see that resentment is our number one offender. Another word for resentment is unforgiveness. And in Matthew chapter 6, I read the seriousness of forgiveness and unforgiveness. In verses 14 and 15, it tells me that if I'll forgive others, my Father in heaven will forgive me. But if I do not forgive others, then my Father in heaven will not forgive me. So that tells me that forgiveness is a serious deal. But I never did take it serious. I had trained myself to be resentful, and not even knowing that it was wrong, or that there was something wrong with the way I viewed people and different situations. I didn't have any idea that was wrong. Why did I not have any idea that was wrong? Because I had trained myself that way all through the years. So in Matthew chapter 7, it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." I just went King James on y'all, didn't I? We got the new NLT. I might go NIV on you in a minute, but just depends on whether I'm reading or recalling. But anyway, it also says that by the same measure, or by the same standard that I judge you, I will also be judged. So I really, I'd heard that and I'd read that, but I really didn't take it to heart until I got to this fourth step. So I'm going to refer to these books, this being the 12 and 12 and this being the big book. And I don't think I can change that, so I just wanted to let everybody know what I was referring to. So in this book, let's go to page 43. Actually, we'll start at the bottom of 42. Last sentence down there, it says, "Step 4 is our vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are." So that's what step 4 is about. We want to find out what's really going on. It says we want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. Okay, so back in step 1, it talks about alcohol warping us. When we get to step 4, see, we've gotten past that. There's really something else going on that's deeper than alcohol. And if I don't get past that, then I don't get the benefit of these principles, and they don't start to change what's going on with me. It says we wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move toward their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us have found that the faith which really works in daily living is still out of reach. Okay, so it takes us back to this faith without works deal. So I sit down, and my first 4 step, I had 4 days to make me a list. I had 52 names on that list. Most of them didn't need to be there. But I was told that if it crossed my mind to write it down, so I wrote it down. And all of my family members were on that list. Most of it was pretty trivial, and once I started searching the first 2 or 3, a lot of them started kind of just fading away. And then later on, I'm in a prison ministry called Kairos, and we do what's called a forgiveness ceremony. And it's real similar to a 4-step. Matter of fact, I've seen a lot of practices like this that's similar to a 4-step. But what we do is we make a list. We carry this piece of paper around with us all day Saturday, and we're listening to talks. And these talks, while these talks are going on, the Spirit's working on us, and we're writing down what comes to our mind, and things maybe we've forgotten. We tried to act like we didn't have. Anybody ever tried to act like you weren't resentful at somebody? And it was all you could do to keep it from, because it's not hard to hear a resentment, is it? When you're in a conversation with somebody, it's not hard at all. How about this? You ever had been in a crowd and somebody mentioned somebody's name and your whole attitude and outlook on life changes as soon as that name comes up? Or maybe a situation comes up and your whole attitude and outlook on life changes when you hear about that? So anyway, we're going through this day of talks, spiritual talks, and different things, and the Spirit's working on us, and we write down whatever is brought to our mind that needs forgiveness. And so it could be forgiveness that I need to give to somebody else, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit later. But right now we're talking about forgiveness, things that have been done to us. Okay? So we write this down, and at the end of the day, we have what we call a forgiveness ceremony. And during this forgiveness ceremony, we hear a couple more talks, and we pray, and we do something. Sometimes we put it in water, and it dissolves in front of us, and sometimes we burn it, and it goes away. But either way, we do some type of physical act to watch it go away. And what it's doing is it symbolizes what happens when we really seek forgiveness in our life. When we seek to forgive others, and when we seek to be forgiven by others. So I write this list down in my 4-step. And if y'all will look at page 65, that same opening, we make that list. That's column 1. Then column 2, we want to write down why. Okay, so if we put it in column 1, we know why. We wrote that name down, and that's what goes in column 2. And so, you can look at those examples, and those examples, when you read them, they'll sound pretty trivial, but when we really take a good, honest look, we probably had some of those same feelings ourselves. And so then we go on over, and we finish the first 3 columns, and then we're going to do something else with it. Now we're going to move from looking at what they did to us, and we're going to move from there and look at our part in the relationship. See, I never got that far before. I would always blame somebody for something, or I would judge something, and then that would be it. As long as I could place the blame somewhere, I was done with it. It was good enough. And what it was doing is it was just building up more and more judgment, more and more resentment, because I wasn't finishing the process. Okay? I wasn't seeking forgiveness. I was seeking somebody to blame. I was seeking the cause of the resentment. So, if you flip over to page 66, that big paragraph, it tells us that it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. So what's going to happen, based on my understanding and my experience, is if I continue this, then my life is going to become meaningless. I'm going to wonder what's really going on. I already know things aren't right, and that disturbs me. But I'm going to start wondering why I'm even here. And that's my experience. I visited what this book refers to as the jumping off place, where I've had suicidal thoughts, and I've done that in many different ways. And I know that in this crowd, just because I know a few of you, I know I'm not the only one that has gone there. And see, but I never made the connection from that hopeless state of mind and body. I never made that connection to the resentment. But from resentment stem all forms of spiritual disease. So my understanding of that is if I choose to have a resentment, I can expect 100 forms of fear, 100 forms of self-delusion, 100 forms of self-seeking or that bondage of self, and I can expect 100 forms of self-pity. So it kind of goes like this. We get worried about something, we get angry about it, neither one of those are working. So now I start feeling sorry for myself. Anybody know that process other than me? I start feeling sorry for myself and I get depressed, and I wonder why I'm depressed. And I'm depressed because I worry. And then I get angry. And then I start feeling sorry for myself, and I keep on going through that cycle over and over again. And I don't want y'all to know. We don't want everybody else to know, do we? We don't want people to know that we're disconnected. Jesus tells us apart from Him we can do nothing. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So when I'm there, when I'm choosing to live that way, when I'm choosing to let my mind be dominated or controlled by the sinful nature through unforgiveness, I'm blocking myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Tells us that later in that paragraph, same paragraph. I block myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity returns, and what it reads there is we drink again. So I wondered why that kept happening. But I never made the connection until I got to the 12 steps. So the 12 steps are a group of principles. Each one of them lays out a principle. It's a principle that comes straight out of the Bible. They're a group of principles. They're spiritual in their nature. That's their makeup. And if they're practiced as a way of life, they can expel the obsession. So you fill in the blank. What kind of obsession? What do you obsess on? Who do you obsess on? What situation is dominating your thought life throughout the day? Anybody still hanging on to something that happened 10 years ago, maybe? That's what I found. 20 years ago. So, Romans chapter 12, in the third step prayer, we said we offer ourselves to you, right? To build with us. We offer ourselves to God to build with us and to do with us. So here in Romans 12, it says that we should be a living sacrifice to God. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. So I want to ask a question. Has anybody in here experienced God's mercy? Anybody? Every day is full of mercy, isn't it? The more I look, and I guess maybe the more God lets me in on, I realize just how much mercy. And I know that I'm way away from understanding fully God's mercy. I know that. But God's mercy is in everything that happens throughout the day in each one of our lives. So in view of His mercy, because of His mercy, give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. So the world is the one that trained me to think the way that I described earlier. That's where I got trained. I got trained, and look, I grew up in a good home, but it wasn't a perfect home. And I got trained. I don't know about anybody else in here, but it seems to me that I've always been bent to go to the wrong crowd. And so I like to hang out with the wrong crowd, and I hung out with them so long that it became the right crowd. When I was a kid, I remember folks talking about hanging out with the wrong crowd. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character, right? So for my parents, they were the wrong crowd. For their parents, guess who else was the wrong crowd? I was the wrong crowd. So it depended on who you were talking to as to who was in the wrong crowd. But we shouldn't copy the behaviors and customs of this world. But let God transform you into a new person. Anybody need a new thought life? I try to get mine renewed every day. I used to not even know that it needed to be renewed, but I try to get it renewed every day. By changing the way you think, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. So here we go. We're going bottom of page 66 in the big book. Okay, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious. That's one question mark. Actually, that's the second question mark. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. And anytime I read this word alcoholic, what has happened, and it does it in the book, the language will change to fit everybody as we go through the steps. And so, anger is a problem. Anybody in here besides me have trouble with anger sometimes? Anger get the best of you. It can start with something small, or it could be something serious. You know, there's some serious stuff that happens too. And then we let the sun go down on it. Ephesians 4:26 tells us not to do that, right? If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. So one way we get free of anger is we do something with it before we go to bed that night. Whatever it is. And it may just be that we put it off till the next day. But we do something with it before we go to bed. And then it tells us but for alcoholics, these things are poison. So it says that we turn back to the list. So it's going to refer us back to that list that we made, that 4-step list. But we're going to look at it from an entirely different angle. Okay, so y'all think about the exact opposite of resentment. What would be the exact opposite of resentment? Forgiveness. Okay? So one definition for forgiveness is to give up a resentment. The other definition that I remember is to pardon, okay? Just in case there's no resentment in connection with it. Which says we're going to turn back to the list and because we're tired of being dominated by this mindset. So I look back at this list and I'm going to cover up what they did, why I wrote their names down. I'm going to take another sheet of paper and I'm going to cover that up. And I'm going to cover up how it affected me. And now all I have is me and this person or the relationship. And so now I'm going to ask myself some questions. All right? And it goes down at the bottom. It says, this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Anybody in here ever just had a bad day? Just like your mind was just always zeroed in on the wrong thing all day long, like just could not get out of it. Do we think we're the only ones that have those kind of days? Anybody in here besides me need the right to be wrong? I need the right to be wrong throughout the day. And if I want that right, then I've got to be willing to give everybody else that right. But see, when that guy pulls out in front of me, that's not I don't think about all the people I've pulled out in front of. I think about where I need to be, where I'm going, and who does he think he is, right? Anybody in here besides me plagued with who do you think you are? Who do you think? That's usually how that resentment gets started, is who do you think you are? Okay, so we're gonna realize that the people who wronged us, maybe they're having that same kind of day. And they're spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, notice that it's not the people that's really disturbing us, is it? You take the same person, maybe change the attitude, change the actions a little bit. There's no anger. They, like ourselves, were sick too. So here's some prayers, really important. If we start to practice this and we use the books, all the steps include prayers in it. Okay? So we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. So this kind of took it to a different level for me. I don't know if y'all have ever visited anybody in the hospital before that was physically sick. They're in the hospital bed. You go and visit them. And some people can get pretty demanding when they're sick, right? Anybody know what I'm talking about? They can get pretty demanding when they're sick. And so if I go visit somebody in the hospital, that means that they mean something to me. Okay? I care for these people enough to go visit them. And say they snap at me about something, or they start making demands that I do something. I'm not going to snap back. Why? Because they're laying in the hospital bed. I'm not going to snap back at them. But that's because I take physical sickness way more serious than I take spiritual sickness. Because if they're not in the hospital bed, John was talking about butting heads earlier. I can't remember the name of that street over there, but anyway, it's here in Senatobia. Me and John had a little difference of opinion. And our foreheads were touching. I remember that part. And you couldn't slide a piece of paper between us while we were discussing our difference of opinion. And so sometimes things get pretty out of hand when we don't allow other people to be spiritually sick, right? Because we take the physical way more serious than we take the spiritual. But if I looked at it like he's spiritually sick, or maybe I'm the one that's spiritually sick. It goes on to say, when a person offended, I said to myself, this is a sick man. Well, it's not always the other person that's a sick man, is it? We're about to get to that. And then there's a prayer that covers any situation right after that. It says, God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Real simple, effective prayer. God save me from being angry. Because if we're going to live that rich and satisfying life, the thief comes only but to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life, have a rich and satisfying life, or have it to the full. So, if we're going to have that rich and satisfying life, then we got to learn to look at things from a spiritual point of view rather than a physical point of view. We're going to pull our list out one more time, referring to our list again. We're going to cover up, we're going to take a piece of paper. I got my list right here. I'm going to take another piece of paper, and I'm going to cover up what they did and how it affected me. And now it's just me and this resentment that I wrote down. Because that resentment may not be a person. It may be a principle or an institution. So I got me and the resentment. And I'm going to ask myself some questions. It says, where have we been selfish? So I look here, I forget everything they've done because it's my inventory. And I look at that relationship and ask myself, have I ever been selfish? Where have I been selfish? Would be a better question. Not if I've been selfish. And then where have I been dishonest? Where have I been self-seeking? Where have I been frightened? And so when we saw our faults, that's what we write down over here on this next sheet of paper. Really, really effective way to seek forgiveness. To seek to forgive other people in really, really difficult circumstances. And my experience is that I had to continue to do that. I had, like when I sat down to do my first 4-step, they didn't all magically disappear. Some of them did. But I had a handful that I had to work on for quite a while. And naturally, they were the ones with the more serious offenses. And I had to work on them. It was somewhere around a year. If I tried to pinpoint the time, I'd be lying. So my Kairos experience is I've turned in empty sheets before. I've put empty sheets in that water that makes that paper disappear. I've also, after I've had an empty sheet, being honest, I've put in one with a name or two on it, or with something on it. And so it's an ongoing process. It's not something that we can just be done with. It's a daily deal. We offer ourselves to God on a daily basis. We do that, and then we do whatever's next in front of us, whatever that is. And if I got a situation that's gnawing at me that needs some reconciliation, we're supposed to be ambassadors for Christ, are we not? So the way I live every day is supposed to draw people to this way of life.